to be back. I'll be your host today, and well, a couple of reminders. First, this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to Flyte's YouTube channel. And second thing is just a reminder that in this meeting we should abide by the Linux Foundation's Code of Conduct, which is basically be nice to each other, as usual. Cool. Let's get started. All right. I'm pasting here the link to the agenda in the Zoom chat, and I'll share my screen. Feel free to add yourself to attendees list, including your affiliation. It helps with notes and all that stuff. Cool. It's totally optional, but it will be great. All right. Anyone joining for the first time? I think I see. I don't know, Troy. Is this your first?
Yes, I'm the first time.
Cool. Great. Welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself briefly?
Sure. So I'm a student from UC San Diego. I'm pursuing my master's degree in computer science, and I know Kevin Su, and I have been working on Flyte for a while, but in the summer I had a summer internship, so I didn't really have a lot of time, but I have finished that, so right now I will have more time to contribute to Flyte, and I'm really happy to join the community, and I'm really interested in different topics. So if you have anything that I can help, that I'm more than happy to contribute to the community. Thank you.
That's great. I think you were participating on Hacktoberfest, right?
Sorry?
Are you participating on Hacktoberfest on the issues we have open for Hacktoberfest or not?
What? Sorry, can you say issue again?
Yeah, but I will have an entire section on Hacktoberfest. It's campaign initiative. I don't know if you're aware of you're already participating in it.
Oh, I don't think so.
Cool.
I don't know what's that.
Yeah. No problem. I'll introduce it briefly here during the meeting, and I will sync with you after the meeting to kind of guide you through the process. It's an interesting initiative for different open source projects there.
Okay, thank you so much.
First time contribution opportunity. So yeah, it's great that you're here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious. How are you finding Flyte so far? I mean, in terms of the learning curve, is it too hard to learn? What are those aspects of Flyte that you find more challenging?
I think it will not be too hard to learn. Originally, I chose another open source project. It's called Unicorn. It's a scheduler of Kubernetes, and I found that really hard. So, and I saw Byron from LinkedIn share a post about Flyte. So I think so. At that time, I thought, why not join the community and try to contribute? And I found this community more supportive. So it will not be really hard to make progress because everyone will help you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Troy, for your feedback. All right. And I think besides Troy, we have familiar faces here, and we'll have, I'll introduce David later on. Cool. All right, we'll go to the next section. News from the ecosystem. First one is the State of AI report. This is produced by I think it's a BC firm. They have really interesting research. It was good to find for me that it was not a state of LLMs, but more general AI. Of course, LLMs are a big topic here, but more generally LLM AI. And to me, one of the interesting findings on the research area was some predictions that probably LMs will exhaust the stock of human generated content by somewhat 2025, 2030, up to 2060. And it's unclear what are the implications of training LMs on synthetic data. And it's impressive. I mean, how many years we spend creating content and posting stuff in the internet, and now LMs are starving for content. So yeah, interesting times. You can check out the entire report in the site. All right. Also, yeah. Also, no problem. A interesting visual resource if you are like myself, just getting started with LLMs and trying to understand all these terms and stuff. This is a really interesting resource. I read the entire thing a couple of times, and now I understand a bit better some of the basic topics and the role of the transformers model in this revolution. So, recommended resource. Right, a really interesting take on the stateless Terraform. Yeah, I mean, the TLDR is that Terraform needs some form of state, and kind of the updated proposal from the author here is to use Git as the backend to handle state for Terraform. What's interesting to me is to see, hopefully we'll see more of this discussion happening in the open tofu Terraform fork, now hosted by Linux Foundation. So hopefully some of these foundational aspects of Terraform as a project will be discussed there. Or that's my aspiration. Cool. And then finally, Protect AI, the open source number of tools to kind of help with to secure AI ML workloads. Two of them are basically scanning tools, scanning for Jupyter notebooks, scanning for ML models. And the third is a group of tools to try to to avoid or mitigate prompt injection attacks on LLMs. Interesting. There's again a lot to do on this front because one thing is scanning and comparing against a known database of vulnerabilities. One different thing is to really sign and provide provenance and attestation for the entire pipeline. That's a whole different thing, but this is an interesting move towards a good end. Right. Yeah, state of AI has wave and protect AI. Cool. That's true. Thank you, Keaton. Right. Any comment around stuff that is happening out there in the AI ecosystem, at least? No. Cool. Right, let's move to next one. Some community project updates. First one, team at Spotify had a really cool presentation a couple of weeks ago at the Crunch conference. I don't think the recording is out yet, and I'm not sure it will be out, but if it's out, we will make sure to post it in the events channel and let everyone know. But Sonja Erickson from Spotify was there sharing how they're using Flyte to power a next-gen platform and running 20K plus workflows. So talking about scale. So this is really interesting. And I hope again that the recording is out soon. But yeah, it's the kind of stuff that will be really beneficial for the project out there that you are probably not at a major conference all days, but even here to see some of you all sharing what you've learned and your experience so far with Flyte. So this is a good example. Cool. Also, Samita, on this same theme or on creating resources for individuals just trying to learn about LLMs. Samita created a very comprehensive guide on starting from the basics, what are LLMs, etc., and finally how you can train them and how you can handle hallucination and fine tuning in production, for example, using Flyte. Right. And so this is interesting, very interesting article, and she spent a lot of time putting this in place. So we hope you find it useful and keep the feedback coming. Anything you like to see in the blog, just let us know, and we're happy to work on it. I'm excited about this one. Finally, we managed to convince Kevin to go out and be on a Flight School episode. If you're not aware, Flight School is a used to be a bi-weekly live stream. Now it's a monthly live stream, so we can accommodate even better content for you. And it's mainly focused on education. We spend a full 60 minutes just diving deep on some specific aspect of the Flight platform. And we ran a survey, and the main topic the community wanted to see is the process to write a Flight plugin using the agent framework. So who's better than Kevin himself to present this? So I hope you all can join, ask questions, and yeah, be there. It's going to be real interesting. This is happening, I believe it's October 26th. So feel please make sure that you reserve your seat by adding your info here. All right, Hacktoberfest. Again, this for some of you, if you're not aware, this is an initiative that was born in DigitalOcean several years ago. It's a way to create or to kind of have a month dedicated to first-time open source contributions and try to help folks with again becoming open source contributors or helping with specific stuff at open source projects. For Flyte, I was curious to see what's the behavior so far. It's been a couple of weeks since this started, and I want to check what was the performance compared with the first 2 weeks of October last year. So the good news is that there's a 61% increase in the number of code contributions, which is awesome, by a similar number of contributors. This is all non-Union AI affiliated contributions, to be clear. So a similar number of contributors producing even more code contributions means a 36% increase in productivity, let's say. So it could mean many things. It could mean that we are creating a more diverse set of contribution opportunities, that we are becoming slightly better on qualifying something as a good first issue. But we can be even better at that. But this is good. I mean, good numbers here. There are right now 42 open issues labeled as Hacktoberfest. 14 of them are unassigned. I will share a note on this. But 33 of them are assigned, but not linked PRs yet. I mean, there's not a sign of progress. I mean, at least right now, right? So you can check the query there. But kind of the recommendation is that, well, I will share a couple of recommendations in a bit. There are 2 blog posts in review because it's not only code. We are trying to promote the idea of, hey, if you're just becoming aware of Flyte and at the same time you're trying to improve the code base, probably that's too hard. You can split the effort. You can collect your learnings in the form of a blog post or a screen share, demo, etc., of what you've learned so far about Flyte, and that also counts. And right now we have 2 blog posts in review from folks outside the community sharing what they've learned so far, which is really interesting. And this is the, let's say, yeah, kind of the amount of contributions. I forgot the name. In the first place, we have no other than Mr. Future Outlier, Eric Chen with 16 PRs, and Hong Xin also, others, and some other individuals in the community, some of them first-time contributors. So yeah, thank you all for your effort. But by collecting this data, I saw some patterns, and I will share a more detailed note on this. But kind of the guidelines right now are, in terms of PRs, first come, first served will be the approach, because there are a lot of issues on Hacktoberfest that someone says, "Hey, please assign this to me." And then 1 week, 2 weeks with no progress, no questions, nothing. And it kind of prevents, because other folks think, okay, this is already assigned, I won't work on this. So right now, kind of the approach is, don't wait on an issue to be assigned to you. Just feel free to work on this. And if you submit a PR, well, the first valid PR will be accepted. That's it. It's not a competition. It's a matter of getting also things done. And also, please link your PR to the issue using the GitHub keywords. It's not enough to just paste the link to the issue. That's it. You need to use one of these keywords for GitHub to actually link the PR to the issue. And with this, we can run reports and really know what issues have shown some sign of progress. And because there's a PR link to it. Right. Okay. Yeah, I will share more details on this later today in the Hacktoberfest channel. Any comment around Hacktoberfest so far? Oh, cool. All right. So without further ado, let's go to the main show, guest presentation. It's great to have here Mr. David Aronchik. He has a long story on prominent open source projects like Kubernetes, Kubeflow, and other communities. I like your hat, David. Really, very
I like Ebita,
financial.
so that's very convenient.
Yeah. Yeah, seems like
Um,
you're very focused. Yeah, welcome, David.
I
Feel
have
free
to
to
say,
yourself.
I'm sorry I haven't participated more. Like there are so many sweet links in the community channel. Like I'm like I totally forgot that the State of AI report was out. That's like my favorite day of the year, is to go through that every year. But then I was off reading the Terraform stateless thing, which was really fascinating. Sorry, it's just, this is a terrific community call. I just wanted to compliment you. I'm sorry, please. I didn't mean to jump in if you had something more to cover.
All right, feel free to jump in. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
welcome, and please
Thank you so much.
and probably share with us something that you
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
doing.
yeah, of course. I'll give a
And
brief overview on what Bacalhau is, and again, so let me say I am long time open source community person. Interestingly, I saw Flyte before it was called Flyte. It was like still like an internal Lyft only thing. And it was when we were getting Kubeflow going, and I was like, wow, this is so great. We got to figure out an integration and so on. And then you went off and built this amazing platform. So really, really exciting for like all the progress here. My background, as you mentioned, is I was the first non-founding PM for Kubernetes. I led that for a bunch of years when I was at Google. I started Kubeflow while I was also at Google. And then I went off to do work at Microsoft in the Office of Machine Learning Strategy, doing open source machine learning strategy out of the Office of the CTO. And then I started this brand new platform. I'm a huge fan, and I respect communities super deeply. So like, please take this as just guy who's a big fan coming in to chat. And ideally, my dream is that we can figure out how 1 + 1 = 3. But you know, truly, it's just like a pleasure to meet and support other open source projects. So let me dive in and give you a little bit of what I'm working on now and why I am here talking to you at all. Can you see my screen in presentation mode?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So you know, as I mentioned, I had previously worked on Kubernetes. Kubernetes still is an amazing platform. I'm really pleased with, you know, how broadly, how much it's changed computing. It's really, really exciting and so useful. But it also has boundaries. It's very good in centralized clusters, particularly things inside of single zones. There are many other solutions out there that are more domain specific, things like Spark and Hadoop and so on. But one big gap that those don't fill is the issue of data. They're very intentionally designed to focus on compute and how to move your compute around, distribute it, orchestrate it, and so on. But they really kind of leave well, okay, you need to figure out where your data problems are, and you need to figure out how to get our compute jobs to that data in order to run with it. And in February of last year, we were, you know, myself and a couple other people were looking at it, and we're like, geez, you know, wouldn't it be nice to have an orchestration system that focused on data first and really relied on, or really made it much easier to work in non-centralized ways? And by that, I mean cross-zone, cross-region, cross-cloud, on-prem, edge, IoT, and so on. Again, this is not a replacement at all for those centralized systems. This is, hey, we should have an augmented system where we have different systems handling different components. And like I said, the problem that we're leaning into here is that enterprises spend too much on data. They spend too much money moving it around, storing unnecessary things, too much time in moving it. Like ultimately, you're gated by the speed of light and bandwidth and other things like that, let alone if the networks are unreliable. And then finally, too much risk. Some data cannot be moved. It's in a regulated environment, it's in a regulated zone or region or whatever it might be, and you can't move the data at all. So the idea is we came up with this project called Bacalhau. Bacalhau lowers your data cost because you don't have to move as much of it. It can reuse existing resources. It can process your data faster because it's distributed across all these many devices. And then, of course, it enhances security because you know the moment you have to move the data, often you're opening yourself up to new surface area. And our tagline is your enterprises operate worldwide, your infrastructure should too. Expanso, just like Union, is the commercial backer or one of the commercial people managing Flyte. Expanso is the commercial backer for Bacalhau. The Bacalhau code, I should say, is you know, all totally open source, Apache 2, MIT licensed. The trademark and the binary are not open source, but the source absolutely is. And you should feel free, dive in, go poke around. We're a brand new, you know, project, and you know, have a lot of would love your contributions. So people often ask why we call it Bacalhau in the first place, and please dive in for any questions. I can talk a lot here, but I'll try and be quick. The year was 2021. We had this question, like, you know, can we build a distributed computation system that is, you know, works specifically on distributed data? And we happen to be in Portugal, and we kept abbreviating it as compute over data. And it turns out that the word for, we kept abbreviating it as COD. And it turns out the word for COD in Portuguese is Bacalhau. So that's why we call it this very strange, you know, hard to pronounce name. Hard to pronounce for non-Portuguese speakers anyway. And I've said it about 100 million times and I still probably get it wrong. You know, Portuguese speakers are probably still mad at me. You know, the big three areas that we want to address with Bacalhau is what you see here. Let me dive into each one. The first is, you know, transforming your data before you move it. Before Bacalhau, you might have a node that's split somewhere in the world. That node could have some amount of data on it. And you have your central compute clusters over here, which is fine. Again, we are not a replacement for them. But more often than not, in order for you to process any of this data, the first thing you have to do is move the data into these central locations, dump it in a bucket, dump it in your lake, and so on. Of course, this often comes with a raft of problems, bandwidth, security, caching, syncing, so on and so forth. And even worse, it's not just one machine moving a small amount of data, it's many machines moving a whole bunch of data, in different volumes. So, this is not ideal. Ideally, you would treat the data where it is before you move it. And that's where things like Bacalhau come in. Hey, come on. Sorry. My boys are angry at each other for some reason. So what you can do is with Bacalhau is instead you deploy your agent to the nodes where you'd like to do some data processing. Then you run your initial data processing jobs on that itself. That could be filtering, transforming, fine tuning, whatever it might be. And then you move only these subsets back. And by doing it that way, you develop a much more efficient. Hey boys, come on. Develop a much more efficient ETL data processing pipeline, because for better or worse, Bacalhau reduces the challenges that you saw there. Again, doesn't eliminate them and doesn't eliminate the need for a central compute cluster. It just changes the way you interact. The second is if you have to execute over an unreliable network. So here we have our data scientist, and she has a global deployment. She has cross-cloud compute. She has devices sitting all over the world on planes, trains, cars, ships, vehicles, you name it. And she can obviously interact with those in a pretty straightforward way today. But, as you know, once you get into any kind of like networking that crosses a single zone, and even often inside a single zone, you can have outages, you can have conflicts, you can have all sorts of things. And the truth is that most systems today are not built for that. You often have to build a distributed queuing system, a declarative rollout system, things like that. Our goal with Bacalhau is to provide all of that infrastructure for her. So all she has to do is submit her job to Bacalhau and describe where she'd like this thing to run. And from that point forward, the Bacalhau will wait until these things appear, and then she can go forward and execute them on them directly. So that's that we help with executing over these unreliable networks. Again, and when I say this, I mean truly anything where you're beginning to cross a latency boundary. That's where you're going to start having unreliable or reliability issues. Not because anyone's not delivering you top quality, but because that is the nature of networking. And then finally, using data in isolation. Before Bacalhau, you might have a centralized orchestration system where this team is developing foundational models and so on, and then they want to deploy them into their individual zones, regions, whatever. Unfortunately, as you know, the zones often can't talk to each other because they have a firewall. But really, from a regulatory perspective, this center of excellence, which is outside these orgs, often can't talk to it either. This could be, HIPAA, SOX, GDPR, you name it. Folks with, touching data today often are presented with a number of different security issues. With Bacalhau, what you do is you simply set up a Bacalhau cluster that spans these various regions, and then you deploy via that network. But then you can show auditably that nothing had ever moved back, that all the work took place inside these organizations. And come on. And from that, you are able to run the jobs in place and get a pure audit log. This can be used for things, just trivial things like doing log vending or things like that, or more sophisticated things. We have an example doing federated learning using pedals, for example, as well. These are a few of the overall use cases we're seeing. The first two here are probably the biggest ones that we're seeing people lean in. Log management, edge ML training or inference. But we also see people using it for distributed data warehouses, fleet management, just doing queries on machines with drivers, logs, things like that. If you have nodes, with geographically distributed information, for example, S3 buckets spread all over the place. That could be an opportunity as well. And there's lots more stuff that we do. Every day, our community comes forward and says, "Oh, have you thought about doing it this way?" I'm like, "Wow, that's a great idea." Someone just last week talked to us about doing things on satellites, for example, with this network. Okay, so that's the high level. You might ask why I'm here talking to Flyte folks. Just to give you a layout of the overall architecture here, you have a user. They submit into the Bacalhau network via CLI or API or hosted dashboard or the UI. That goes to a logical, not a physical, global API endpoint, and then that network between a series of local schedulers decide who get the job. That job gets deployed to a node, which bids into that, and then that job actually gets executed. Pretty straightforward stuff, and not different than most global schedulers. You can see our history with centralized schedulers like Kubernetes on the team. But this concept of these local schedulers that have authority that then pass that off to the node, that's where we really start to get kind of unique value. Okay, so like I said, that's the overall architecture. What we're seeing and what we hope that we can partner with Flyte and other orchestrators on is something like this, where you might have a Bacalhau network that understands where jobs need to be scheduled according to the data that they have or other criteria. Now, we are not a workflow engine, right? We need an external workflow engine to drive us, and we're not going to go and try and re-implement how to execute on DAGs. So what our thoughts are is, our data scientists truly, other than knowing that there exists a Bacalhau network, ideally, she has very little to do with any individual interaction with Bacalhau. Instead, she submits her job to Flyte, and Flyte says, "Oh, this is a Bacalhau job," and I'll show you how we do that in just a second. You deploy the Bacalhau network with the scheduling constructs, and then Bacalhau will find the node where that is the right fit for that particular step, runs it on that location, and then passes that back to step one. Step one then passes it on to step two. Step two doesn't need to contact the Bacalhau network. It may contact a different orchestration system or something like that, but that goes forward. And then we move on to step three, and step three says, "Oh, this is also a Bacalhau job." It hands that to Bacalhau. Bacalhau says, "Oh, that's good, but this is a separate node that needs to execute on this information." It finds it, schedules it, runs it, and passes it back. And then it goes to step three, and then our data scientist is happy. But all she had to do was interact with Flyte in order to make this work. Does this all make sense? I know that was a lot of talking. Let me show you just really quickly what this looks like. We have a blog post where we talk about this. We just announced this overall plugin. You can see this in our video here. But the code is really straightforward. Can you see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the code is really straightforward. It's not super Pythonic. We apologize. We know that it's going to be better, we promise. But you can see here that how easy it is. So within your overall Flyte workload, you can see here's the plugin that you use. You define what the types and tasks are. And then inside that, you use native. These are Bacalhau constructs, what engine you run on, the publisher spec, the specific version of Docker image you use, and so on. And this is a really simple one. If we click through here, our code is all published. Again, we are big open source folks. And I don't know why that linked off to that. We need to fix that URL. But if we click through to our Flyte, you can see this here. Where is it in examples? My apologies here. Oh, here's an example. Sorry about that. So here are two example ones. Here's just a simple hello world that you can see earlier. This is with, you saw earlier that we had a bunch of defaults. This is with if you define all of the different features that you would want, but pretty straightforward. You can say Docker, you can say Wasm, you can dictate like exactly what labels you'd like to deploy to, so on and so forth. But if you'd like to do something more complicated, like chain jobs together, where the output of one job is now an input to the second job, you can see that here. Here's how you do two tasks executed in serial, where you do task 1 and then task 2. And again, very straightforward. We know that this is not Pythonic. I am a big Python fan. We will get there. But generally speaking, you can do this right now and already begin to fold Bacalhau tasks into your Flyte workloads. So that's the broad strokes. I did a lot of talking there. Who has questions or thoughts?
No, this is great. I had a question.
I'll leave this up so that if people want to join, you can jump through. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so computation, when you do multiple sets of computation, one after the other,
Yep.
you have to move the data between them sometimes. What is the underlying fabric to move that data? So let's say a computation A runs on some, as you showed in the corporate example, on the AZ1, and then the computation 2 runs on AZ2 without allowing the data. But computation 2 wants to use the results of A, which may not fit into, which may be terabytes. How does that happen?
Yeah, so great question. It largely is up to your overall architecture. What I will say is that some people say, okay, well, I'm going to put the intermediate stuff into an S3 bucket. That's perfectly acceptable. Some people could make the data available via URL. We support that natively. So you could say, okay, Bacalhau job or Bacalhau task 2, pull from this URL, and we can do that in a job itself. The native way we do it is by using IPFS to automatically move data from place to place. Again, you don't have to think about it. Job 2, you could say, I want to schedule you to here, but the data is not going to be present there. I want you to move that data to, the second job, and we'll take care of the moving for you as long as you've set up a private network. Now, and by setting up a private network, I only mean that the nodes can see each other, which is a big caveat. Some people don't want nodes to be able to see each other. And in that case, you're going to have to figure out a different way to move the data between each other. But the default is that if you set it up and any node in any zone can see each other, we can handle moving that data for you. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah. So basically, it is a pluggable data fabric, and the recommended one is IPFS. I actually didn't know much about IPFS. I'm learning, so sorry, uninitiated here.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that's exactly right. So IPFS does the sharding, does the movement, things like that by default. It really is up to you. We have a native S3 reader writer. We, as I mentioned, support URLs. We also have an open pluggable storage spec. The reality is that every scenario can be different. Some people want data to move. Some people don't want data to move. Some people want just the results to move. All of these are available to you. And if you have a particular scenario in mind that we don't support, please come talk to us because we'd love to be able to support it. But like I said, by default, just imagine there are magic gremlins behind the scenes that will make sure your data is where you want it to be when you tell it to execute a job in a certain location, and we take care of that. But again, that is the default. It is not required.
Right.
What other questions? Anything?
Hi, David. Niels from Union AI. Just wanted to ask what your experience was writing that plugin. Was it easy, hard?
Well, so it's interesting.
Some of the...
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to the contributors meeting last week because our experience, it was good, but we're like, hey, shouldn't there be a simpler way to do this? Like, we can't be the only people looking to do this. And so the truth is we just weren't aware of how rich the agent framework was. And now we're going to go back and do some work. Again, in the spirit of making our SDK more Pythonic, we also want to do this. So really, like I will say, I think our experience was generally quite good. I'm happy to put you in contact with the developer who specifically worked on it, but I don't think we had any particular issues. We were really pleased.
Awesome. Yeah, for the agent stuff, yeah, we're happy to set up a channel just to, have a channel there, communication. So Kevin and others can help you out with the agent
I love it.
iteration.
I definitely don't want to turn this into a business development or other meeting, but look, what I said earlier was genuine and real. Like, we are well aware that we will only succeed if we go and develop very clear partnerships with other open source projects and other projects in the world who solve the problems that we don't. And so for us, the more that we can highlight Flyte as a solution for customers that we're talking to, either our customers or your customers, where we're like, hey, you have this complex workflow that you want to use some Bacalhau, but you also want to use these other things. Here's a wonderful, straightforward way to look at your overall solution, your overall problem with a joint solution. And the more that we can highlight that, the happier we are.
Cool.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, David.
Well, is there any other question? Well, in the meantime, I do have one. I noticed that the architecture is basically a global API endpoint, I believe, and there are kind of local schedulers. Is that correct?
Yep.
So,
sorry. Let me this here. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Let's say that the backend for one specific environment is Kubernetes itself. So and also you have Flyte. So potentially you will have 3 schedulers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know. What's been your experience on this kind of multi-scheduling environments?
Well, so that's a very interesting point. We have had limited experience to date. And the reason is because in our 1.1, we just announced a new feature here, which you can come and read about. And actually, we had a office hours a few weeks ago that talked about it. Oops, that was the wrong blog post. Here. So the feature you're going to want is called a pluggable executor. And what this allows for is any arbitrary engine, just anything that's a binary on that node itself, you can then execute. You can run a script. You could run, whatever, kube control, flight control, like take your pick. So we haven't dug into that too deeply yet. But that's not because we're not really excited about this, because you're exactly right. Our theory is that these aren't going to be just nodes. This is going to be a Kubernetes endpoint or a SaaS endpoint or a Flyte endpoint or whatever it might be. And this will schedule to a local scheduler inside a single zone. And then inside that zone, we're going to communicate back and forth with whatever's local. And that could be, like I said, a trivial VM, or it could be a very rich, orchestration system. Either one works for us, and we would love to, explore use cases and things like that. I'm sure that, you've seen many customers who have, 10 different Flyte deployments based on the region. Like, wouldn't it be nice to have a way to layer over the top of those so someone could schedule just based on a label? And that's something we very, very easily could do.
Okay, thank you, David. Any other question?
Okay. Well, like I said, please come join us. We would love to, make this richer, deeper. I can't stress enough how many workflow use cases we keep hearing popping up, which is why we had to go and work on this. We've developed 2 different workflow plugins, and are probably going to have more. We have a Kubernetes CRD in the pipeline. that people are working on and other things like that. We think there are lots of ways of doing this. The easiest way to get in touch with us is on Slack. You can go to our GitHub repo and so on. But thank you so much for the time and opportunity to come speak. And please let me know how I can do. I'm a huge open source fan and want to help everyone.
Thank you, David. Thank you for coming. Yeah, it's really interesting work. All right. Great. I don't see anything else in the agenda. Is there any other question, topic, some of you want to discuss? Yeah, Troy. No. Yeah, that's perhaps good. All right. With that, thank you all for joining, and hope to see you in the next one. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.